This podcast is going to be about culture in the Inca world. And here you see Machu Picchu, probably the most noteworthy or perhaps most well known aspect of Inca culture. Certainly, this shows off their superior architecture. But Inca culture was about more than just Machu Picchu. And as they conquered, the Inca really focused on spreading their culture. Unlike the Mexica, when they built the Aztec Empire, the Inca really wanted people to adopt their ways of doing things. They wanted people to speak their language. They wanted them to worship their gods. The Inca did their best to make sure these things happened. They would take the children of local chiefs and bring them back to Cuzco, where they would essentially instruct them in the ways of the Inca language, culture, religion, everything. And they would convince them and try to do their best to convince them in a positive way that the Inca really are the superior people of the Andean region. So they would hope those kids would go back to their respective villages or cities as new leaders. And in that time, they would kind of advocate for the Inca. They would think of themselves as Inca, and they would spread the Inca culture. So the two types of culture that the Inca were most concerned with spreading were language and religion. And we'll start here by looking at language. And Quechua can still be found today. The Inca language was Quechua, and they essentially wanted the people they conquered, their subjects, to speak Quechua. Here you see it's a Spanish Quechua sign, so we can actually see, kind of figure out what one of the words are. This is Avenue of the Sun, Sol, of course, is sun, and Inti. Inti is the Quechua word for sun. And this kind of really brings us right to religion. One of the most important gods for the Inca was their sun god, and that god's name was Inti. So here you see kind of a modern remnant of this Inca culture that they were spreading throughout the Andean world. Another important god for the Inca was Viracocha. Viracocha was the creator god for the Inca. And the Inca pushed Viracocha upon the people they conquered. It was another god that they tried to kind of incorporate into the systems of the people who became their subjects. The Inca actually viewed their own kings almost as if they were gods. And along those lines, they preserved their kings after they were dead. This is not an Incan king, but it is an Incan mummy. The Inca mummified their honored dead, not like Egyptians by wrapping them, but by a process that we still do not fully understand. But it's likely that they freeze dried their mummies, leaving them outside at extremely cold temperatures at night, kind of thawing them in the sun in the day, and doing this repeatedly until the body is completely dried out, totally dehydrated. But either way, they would bring these mummies out for celebrations. They would honor them as if they were still part of the people's lives. Essentially, the Inca decided to live with their kings forever. They preserved all of their kings in this way. We still haven't found the actual mummy of an Inca king. Hopefully, one day that will happen. But don't hold your breath. Without a doubt, one of the most impressive aspects of Incan culture is their architecture, and of course, here is again Machu Picchu, perhaps the most impressive Inca architectural feat. It's truly a city in the clouds, but it reveals more about the Inca than just their ability to build amazingly cool-looking cities high in the mountains. There was an observatory here. This reflected their astronomical knowledge. They had a 365-day calendar, just like the Mayas, a very accurate calendar of Mesoamerica. Inca art also reflected their connection to the natural world. Here you can see a silver sculpture of a llama. And even the city of Cusco itself was laid out to kind of resemble a puma. The original street plan was laid out to link with nearby mountains that acted as the head. And you can still see this today in tourist brochures that are advertising the city. They trace the outline of the original layout for you, and you can see the Inca really felt as though they were kind of one with their environment. And so where do we leave this short look at Inca culture? Well, Inca culture is still present today in Peru. Millions of people speak Quechua. It's the second national language of Peru. While people might not worship Inca gods anymore, Viracocha or Inti, um, Inca religion has been incorporated into Christianity. There was a syncretism that happened in the Andes, whereby aspects of the Inca religion kind of remain or manifest themselves within Christianity today. Other aspects of Inca culture, including dress, have persisted throughout the Andean region today. This is not just limited to Peru, this is true of Bolivia, some parts of Ecuador as well. Of course, Machu Picchu is still there today. The Peruvian government is certainly happy about that. That's definitely a cultural legacy of the Inca. It provides a lot of income for the Peruvian government. Many of the terraces that the Inca built are also still there today, and they provide a way for people today, contemporary people, to grow food. So while every aspect of Inca culture certainly has not been preserved, many of them have, and they help to make Peru a richer place today.